Welcome to our series of benefits briefing here at Happl. Great for you to join us today. My name is Luke. Obviously, I work for Happl. We're an employee benefits technology platform provider operating in over 160 countries and 70 written languages. Today, I'm joined by Hugo from Electric Car Scheme. Welcome, Hugo.
Cheers, Luke. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Obviously, it'd be great just to hear a little bit about you and your role. I know you're the partnerships manager at Electric Car Scheme. So yeah, it'd be great to hear about your role and a little bit more about Electric Car Scheme.
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks, Luke. Lovely to be here. My name's Hugo, and I am partnership manager at the Electric Car Scheme. I've been at ECS for about 3.5 years now, working in a variety of different roles. So I was originally in the sales team. I now work in the partnership function. A bit about the Electric Car Scheme. So we were founded a little over 5 years ago, and our goal is to essentially support employers and employees making the transition to net zero more affordable and accessible. And we do that through employee benefits, predominantly through salary sacrifice for EVs and for charging solutions.
Yeah, I'm obviously a little bit biased. I'm not going to lie, Hugo. I actually have a car through the settles, and so yeah, I'm very familiar with a little bit about your service and proposition, and obviously from my own personal journey, obviously improving my impacts to the environment as well by having an electric car and also having a nice car to drive every day as well. So obviously we're here to talk a little about electric vehicles and car schemes more broadly, but actually I think it's really important to think about the context, because obviously environmental, social and corporate governance is obviously a very big part for a lot of businesses and organizations. When you look at pretty much every organization now, from SMEs right up to multinational large corporates globally, really do focus on their impacts now to the environment and that wider and ESG kind of requirements. And actually we see it now from an investor's point of view and too. So from early stage investments and VC kind of organizations right the way through to institutional investors, they are expecting now those organizations to really pay attention to this and make an impact and positive impact in their environment. So it'd be great just to hear a little more from you around, what is an EV scheme? And let's start from there, and then we'll maybe understand about how that fits into that wider environmental, social, and corporate governance framework.
Absolutely. So first of all, great to hear that you have a car and that you're enjoying it. That's always nice to hear. So EV car schemes became very popular amongst businesses, and this all actually started back in 2019 when the government introduced essentially subsidies and incentivizing the general public to getting into an electric car through salary sacrifice. So they set the benefit in kind at the time at 0%, and that's now risen to 3%. But what that essentially means is that employees can sacrifice part of their gross salary in exchange for a vehicle which is being provided by the employer. Now, because that's coming out of their gross salary, it means that they're reducing their taxable income, and they'll see a saving between 20 to 50% on that car. It is essentially the most affordable way to get your hands into an EV if you are looking to go down that route.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you're right. There's definitely lots of incentives by the government to do this, and obviously it fits the broader UK nation in particular for that net zero kind of target that the government is trying to achieve as well, which we know is a challenge. And obviously we're both based in the UK, but obviously Happl and our clients are obviously global and in terms of their workforce. And obviously we talked a lot about clients, and they're looking for schemes like this to incentivize their employees all around the world. So I know obviously Electric Car Scheme or ECS, you're obviously also in Germany as well. So yeah, maybe to hear a little bit about what you're doing in Germany and some of the European countries in particular, what incentives are available for organizations.
Absolutely. So a good few years ago, we started exploring, could we go into other markets to help support that kind of that push and that aim of supporting other businesses make that transition to also electric cars, net zero, etc. And we identified the German market as an excellent option to kind of go to. And I think we launched in Germany at the start of 2024. And we've now actually grown to a team, I think, of around 5. And it's been really exciting to see how that grows. It's a little bit more complicated when obviously looking at expanding into other countries, as each different country has their own kind of tax legislation and laws. And we had identified Germany as a country that operates quite similarly to the UK. Now, I know other countries in Europe, particularly France, Sweden, etc., they offer subsidies for actually purchasing the car. So that's a great way, again, of trying to push kind of individuals making that transition into an EV. And what's actually really exciting in the UK is that the government recently launched the EV car grants. where they now actually offer up to £3,750 off the list price of an electric car. What's also great to see about the EV car grant is that they can actually be included on the salary sacrifice. So again, that's reducing the cost even further for an employee.
No, that is definitely great to see that. And actually, like we see lots of other countries, like you say, exactly to that point, have different incentives and largely kind of tax benefit incentives for both the employer and sometimes the employee as well. And like if you look at the US and different states, or it's different states and federal law, actually there are quite a significant incentives that are being offered kind of by kind of each region and state provision as well. So it's definitely not something that's only isolated to the UK. Yes, the UK is probably doing things a little bit differently to maybe other countries in terms of that incentive, and particularly the leasing options that could then be used through salary sacrifice. But actually, it is a global challenge. A lot of countries are recognizing that they need to move to that net zero kind of goal. And actually, one of the biggest factors in that, outside of heating our homes and electricity kind of energy use, actually is our transportation. And so therefore, electrifying that can be a really big way to make an impact to that net carbon reduction. So obviously, car schemes are great, but actually when we look at that broader ESG and its environmental, social and corporate governance, just talk to me a little bit around ESG, what that actually means, and actually how you're kind of looking at that through the lens from an electric car scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. So ESG is becoming more and more important for businesses, particularly larger businesses, but still for SMEs. And ESG is a fantastic way for businesses to essentially show off their sustainability and ethical impact on the world, and to show that they are, doing their best to support, that kind of reaching that net zero goal. If we break it down, so obviously environmental, that looks at, how is that business impacting, or directly or indirectly impacting the environment. If you look at then the social aspects, that's talking about, employees, how do you kind of ensure that your employees, you have a kind of a happy and healthy workplace. It also looks at kind of suppliers, are you vetting your suppliers? Do they have the same kind of aims and goals as, are you kind of aligned with them? Then you also have kind of the governance side of things, which basically looks at kind of the internal structure and of a company. Now, EV car schemes, and particularly the electric car scheme, ECS, can help support in all three of those areas. So obviously in environmental, we support in carbon reduction. So obviously, if you push a EV car scheme to employees, that will help offset and reduce your carbon emissions and your scope 3 emissions in particular. You then have kind of the social aspect, which is, being able to offer a car scheme to employees and boost the employee benefit package in general. Typically means you'll have happier employees, you'll, potentially reduce kind of churn rates, improve staff attrition, etc. And then lastly, you have governance. And we actually provide annual impact reports, which basically states how much carbon emissions you're offsetting through the benefits. So we have some really clear kind of data and documents that we can share with employers.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because actually when you look at those goals and objectives of organizations, actually it's coming through from a number of kind of facets and areas that you kind of really highlighted and made clear there. So particularly like from investment and actually how organizations are funded, actually, ESG is considered by 89% of investors now when kind of looking at organizations to invest their money kind of into. And actually when you look at recruitment of talent and those kind of things, 70% of Generation Z or Z, depending on how you want to put it, say millennials, really look for organizations that are having a positive impact to the environment. And actually, it actually looks, it really translates across all of those kind of key areas. So it's not just a hygiene factor, as it might have been maybe a few years ago, to say this is what we're doing from our emissions and make an impact, to actually this now is a tangible tool that is really impacting a business ability to kind of grow for the future as well. So I think it's a really important thing to focus on.
So Luke, obviously I'm very familiar with electric car schemes and how that supports companies, their employees, with their kind of ESG goals and aims. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about other kind of benefits that businesses can potentially implement to help support with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Electric power schemes are great, but they are one piece of a big jigsaw puzzle of options that are available to employers and obviously to ultimately employees as well. So transport is obviously the biggest one. So we see lots of other schemes, both here in the UK and globally, through cycle to work provisions. So whether that's salary sacrifice in the UK or other kind of subsidies in other kind of countries, and a great popular kind of options. Obviously, it depends on workforce kind of location. So I think offering both is kind of a good way to balance those kind of transport needs and requirements for employees and organizations. But it goes much beyond that as well. So we see the shift from an ESG kind of point of view, looking at things like retirement savings plans and actually understanding where those funds are invested that you're saving towards your retirement. And definitely seeing a big shift now in terms of the availability of ethical and sustainable kind of funds and investments kind of strategies. There's obviously lots of other kind of benefits as well. So not necessarily physical, tangible benefits, but it can be things like policies, procedures around encouraging better use of sustainable foods, and to even things like giving employees water bottles in the workplace, which sounds almost a little bit silly and frivolous in some respects, but actually can make it really easy for employees to sustainably kind of utilize water in the right way. And small impacts can lead to kind of bigger kind of results as well. And actually there's lots of other things. So whether it's looking at inclusivity of benefits, L&D kind of budgets, and how they are shaping people's kind of understanding from that environmental, social and corporate governance point of view too. And actually when you look at the stats, actually employees want to work for organizations that are kind of providing that. I kind of shared one a little bit earlier, but actually we also see that typically 70% of employees are more loyal to organizations where they're actually putting front and center that support for ESG goals and as well, and impacting the employees day to day. So definitely something that we kind of see. But with all of these things, it's great to have them, but if you're then having to manually administer them through as an employer, that can become the challenge. So that's where Happl, as much as we do all the traditional benefits and everything in between, anything can be a benefit on our platform. So actually promoting the fact that there are sustainable options, from choices in staff canteens and food programs through to other initiatives from Staff to Work or other kind of transports kind of subsidies, actually enabling the employer to bring it all into one place for an employer to see, is also just as important, because it's all well and good having these different options. If employees don't know it's there, or it's really hard to find or how to access, that's one of the big challenge as well. So that's where Happl, alongside ECS and other providers, is making a difference to workforces today.
Absolutely.
And so obviously we're talking around ESG quite a bit and goals. And actually one of the questions we get asked is, who actually cares? Because there's a lot of noise in today's kind of world and environment around, is this something you really need to worry about, or those kind of goals? Like lots of organizations and governments are putting some of these goals in kind of place. So it'd be great to get your take and understanding around why this is important to care about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to ESG goals and trying to make more sustainable choices, even in your day-to-day life, I think if you speak to anyone, everyone will say that they want to make more sustainable choices, whether that's, getting into an EV, whether that's getting a bike through the Cycle to Work scheme, or even just taking the train more, or taking the tube, or whatever it may be. However, a main blocker for making that transition to a more sustainable mode of transport, whatever it may be, is typically pricing. And it is typically more expensive to make that more sustainable choice, even when you're, buying food at a supermarket, right? If you're going organic, that's significantly more expensive than if you weren't. And I think it's up to businesses to almost kind of set precedents, and also to enable their employees to make that transition in a more affordable and accessible way. That's why obviously the government brought in those incentives back in 2019, and they're actually set in stone until 2030. So low benefit in kind is set until 2030. We expect that to actually be extended, as we're currently behind on our our net zero roadmap. So I think it's for businesses to set that precedence to support employees make that transition in a more kind of affordable and accessible way.
I agree with you on that. I think there's there's definitely a need to make that shift. I think we all logically know it is the right thing to do, but actually it takes some behavioral change by us as individuals, and therefore actually enabling people to make it an easier transition is ultimately kind of what's needed. And that's where the likes of incentives for electric car schemes can be a really kind of big help in kind of making that transition. So like we mentioned kind of those, go back to kind of talk about electric vehicle schemes in particular, and kind of how is ECS helping that transition? How is it that you're making it easier for employees to be able to switch into electric vehicle schemes? And how is it also working for employers to also be mindful there is some additional administration in looking at these other schemes in the first place?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question. And I think when the electric car scheme was set up 5 years ago, there were kind of three main pillars or areas that we wanted to focus on to make sure that we were offering the best kind of all-round benefit for both the employee and the employer. So from the employee's perspective, we wanted to ensure that the pricing and the affordability and accessibility was as competitive as possible. And the way that we managed to do that is, rather than buying and owning the leases ourselves and setting the prices, we actually shop the market to find the employee the best price and the best deal. What that means is that we have access to multiple leasing providers' pricing. And obviously in the leasing world, prices fluctuate almost on a kind of a weekly basis. So being able to shop the market gives us the best advantage to find an employee the best price and the best deal. We also actually have the largest selection of used EVs available to employees, which is really exciting. We actually pulled some stats on this a couple of months ago now, and it's around 75% of employees in the 20% tax bracket are opting for used EVs because they're obviously more affordable and accessible. And I think it's around 60% of any new car order at the electric car scheme is actually now for a used car rather than a new car. And I think that's really exciting because, as an employer, when you're launching a employee benefit, you want it to be as accessible to everyone in the business, right? You don't want to launch it to a certain segment because that might cause upset or and whatnot within that team. And then from the employer's perspective, we wanted to ensure that we could offer the best risk protection possible. So we actually offer complete risk protection to the employer. So should an employee leave for whatever reason, we actually cover the kind of early termination cost of that vehicle. So it will just be handed back. Just make it nice and easy. And then lastly, from a admin perspective, we have a kind of an employer portal where we house all of the kind of payroll instructions, any HMRC documents. So that's kind of like P11D forms. And we also provide annual impact reports at the end of every tax year, which basically states how much carbon emissions they're offsetting. And that's really good as part of their kind of scope-free reporting.
No, it makes perfect sense. There's a couple of things you said there I think it's really important to kind of highlight that one of the things that sometimes a lot electric vehicle schemes like from ECS kind of get looked at or perhaps frowned upon is it's seen as something that can only be forwarded to people who are earning a much higher salary. I think it's really important to talk around the fact there is now this ability to provide second-hand cars. And when you say second-hand, they're like a couple of years old at max, like really low mileage. So it just still feels like a brand new car, but it therefore makes it much more affordable. So understanding actually that is now particularly available, and actually the 20% bracket employees are typically choosing that case really kind of powerful, because it just shows that scheme is there, making it available to kind of everybody. I think the administration is a big point, and one of the questions that kind of gets brought up is I'm worried as an employer putting this in, am I going to get stuck with this car, and have I got to pay these payments? Like what happens if X, Y, Z happens? So talk us through a little bit around that, some of the protections you mentioned there. So let's say an employee chooses a car and 3 months later, for whatever reason, I'm leaving the organization. These things happen. What is it that you kind of provide? How the protections work for organizations?
Absolutely. So I guess if we go back to, what's the actual mechanics of a salary sacrifice car, essentially the employer will lease the vehicle from the leasing provider, and then the employee will agree to sacrifice part of their gross salary in exchange for that car. Now, that does mean that the employer is technically the name on that lease. They are kind of the owner of the lease, which means if an employee did leave for whatever reason, then the employer would typically be stuck with that car. And if they wanted to hand the car back to the leasing provider, then there's typically a 50% early termination fee. And you can imagine 50% of the remaining lease can be quite a lot of money depending on how far into the lease that employee was. Now, what we offer at the electric car scheme is complete risk protection from day one. So we cover redundancy, dismissal, long-term sickness, family-friendly leave, etc., all from day one. So should an employee leave for any of those reasons, we will essentially reimburse the employer to make sure they're not left out of pocket. I touched on family-friendly leave. So this works slightly differently to, if an employee resigns, because obviously they're not actually leaving the business, they're just going on leave for potentially 9 to 12 months. Now, during that period of time, they're more than likely to fall onto statutory pay. And what that will mean is that they actually won't be able to salary sacrifice anymore for that vehicle. And it's actually against, you're not actually, and also from an employer's perspective, you're not allowed to remove a benefit from someone that's going on family-friendly leave. So what will happen in that period of time is the employer will be expected to carry on those lease payments to the leasing provider. And what we would do at the electric car scheme is reimburse that employer that amount to ensure that they're not left out of pocket and that employee can still enjoy that vehicle. And then when they come back to full pay, back to work, they will just take up the lease payments again.
Makes sense. And like, these protections sound great. Honest, as an employer, I think that's really kind of helpful. But it also sounds costly. So like, actually, as an employer putting a scheme in place with the electric car scheme and obviously other providers as well, electric vehicle scheme, like what is the actual cost to an employer for operating these kind of schemes?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a question we get a lot from employers. They'll often say, this sounds too good to be true. How much is this going to cost? Now, the great thing about an EV car scheme is that they're actually cost neutral and they can be cost positive. Now, the reason being is that obviously the employee is sacrificing part of their gross salary, which covers the cost of the lease. So let's say the lease is £500, the employee will sacrifice £500 from their gross salary. So that leaves you at cost neutral. Now, what that also means is as an employer, you're actually going to see a saving in employer NI because you're going to be paying less national insurance on that employee's salary. So you can actually be cost positive. And then as a business, you could look at reinvesting that into other areas in the business, whether that's, bringing on a benefit platform or bringing on other benefits that may have a cost associated with them.
And obviously, administration is a big thing. It's a challenge for organizations as well. So I know you provide a platform and kind of portal, and obviously we work in partnership together today. I think that kind of reduces even further that kind of administration. So just walk me through a little bit around some of that administrative support that you provide to organizations too.
Absolutely. So all of our clients will have access to a customer success manager. They will essentially be their point of contact. They'll look after them and they'll help all the way from planning the launch of the benefit to then, launching it to employees, and then also checking in post-launch to make sure, everything's running smoothly. They're kind of their dedicated point of contact. You mentioned, obviously, we have an employer portal. Within this portal, we house all of the kind of admin supports. That's payroll instructions, kind of P11D forms, so HMRC documents. They can also filter and review car orders. So if an employee wants to order a car, that will then they'll be notified within that portal. So it's super easy and slick to use. And obviously working with the likes of Happl, where you help support with those with the administration of the scheme is really great, especially for those kind of mutual clients that we have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really important to call this out. It's great, the service you provide. Actually, it's a brilliant kind of tool in the platform. But let's be honest, as an employer, they've got other benefits like the work scheme, life insurance, income protection, healthcare schemes. They've got lots of other portals they have to kind of manage. And actually, you're right, that's where we work in partnership with you as a provider and others as well to make it even easier for an employer. So actually, as Happl, an employer can offer all of these different benefits and options, but they don't have to worry about having to log into multiple different benefit providers. Everything is managed centrally for them, both from P11D and taxation and kind of requirements, as well as payroll deductions as well. So I think it's great, obviously, right? Let's be really kind of clear. I think it's a really important thing to do. But actually, by working together as Happl, we can actually make it even easier for organizations to offer not just electric car schemes or these schemes, but a wider kind of benefits as well. Look, Hugo, let's talk a bit more around the future and kind of what might be coming or happening. So, what does the future look like from an electric vehicle kind of scheme point of view in the UK and potentially beyond in other countries as well?
Absolutely. So thankfully, the government have kind of set the benefit in kind staying until 2029, and we expect that to actually be extended further, as we're still quite far behind on our kind of net zero roadmap as a company. And kind of data has shown that introducing this kind of incentive of low benefit in kind has actually significantly contributed to the uptake in electric cars. I think there's around 1.4 million on the road now, and we expect that to obviously increase quite significantly. I think also what's very exciting is that the government have pledged £2 billion in the EV infrastructure across the UK. So that also shows the government's kind of commitment to basically going electric. And something that the electric car scheme launched last year, which is super exciting, is called the Charge Scheme. Now, the Charge Scheme essentially enables employees to actually save 20 to 50% on the charging cost or the energy going into that car. So whether you're charging at home using the public network or charging at the office, you can actually now save between 20 to 50% on that. And the reason why we brought that benefit out is because, you know, we were looking at how can we make the EV car scheme even more affordable and accessible. We introduced used cars, which was great. We saw the benefit of that with, you know, 70% of employees in the 20% tax bracket ordering a used car. And so we looked at other ways that we can also support employees essentially. And we realized that charging, if you've got a driveway and you can charge at home, then great. It's super cheap. You can get a overnight tariff. It will cost, you know, £4 to £5 to fully charge your car, whereas the public network has actually increased over the last number of years to the point where it's actually more expensive than going to a petrol station and filling up with diesel or petrol. So we wanted to see if there was a way that we can essentially support employees who do not have a driveway. I've actually got a used car through the scheme. I don't have a driveway, so I use the Charge Scheme as a way of saving 22% additionally on my kind of monthly bill. I think moving forward to the future, obviously there's rumours and there's hopes that they will extend salary sacrifice into other kind of green benefits. So, you know, the likes of heat pumps, potentially solar panels. And I think it's shown that when you do introduce these incentives and kind of tax breaks for people, it does support the transition to moving into that kind of sustainable future.
Yeah, I wholly agree, and great to hear about the Charge Scheme. I think that's a really valuable benefit to people, particularly where you can't park your car at home and charge at home, because that is kind of a big kind of cost into that. But I agree with you in the rumours. I think there is definitely a need for, not just here in the UK, but other countries kind of around the world, to meet this net zero target. Like, we have all signed up to it and wanting to kind of commit to it, but it is going to require some major changes to infrastructure. And actually the biggest infrastructure is homes and the heating of kind of homes. You know, it's not like we all live in Florida and it's a nice warm kind of temperature all year round and therefore central heating is not required. We're in the UK, like, you need central heating and you know, especially in the winter. So actually being able to shift to a more sustainable fuel kind of source and a kind of structure such as heat pumps is really important for us to meet those kind of goals. But those things are expensive. You know, that's the reality. So yeah, it'd be great to see if those can be brought into the next budget. We'll see, or future budgets as well, because actually I think that'd be a great benefit to help organizations really support their employees and make those employees feel really valued and want to be kind of loyal to those organizations, as we've seen from the stats already as well.
So Luke, obviously we've been working in partnership for a couple of years now. And from your experience, what are you currently kind of experiencing from, you know, employers and employees when they're looking into, you know, EV schemes or other kind of sustainable benefits?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is it's not just the big employers that are looking at these benefits. Let's be really clear. This is something that is available to SME organizations. Yes, there's some challenges around some of the financing side of things, but you've got great solutions that kind of really support organizations that don't necessarily have access to the finance and leasing kind of options, that still makes it an affordable option for employees. And so I think that's a really important thing to be kind of mindful of when you look at these schemes, is not think that it's just something that the bigger employers do. It's something that an organization of any size can offer to employees. And there's good reason to, because it's not just from an environmental, social, and corporate governance point of view as an organization and those kind of meeting those targets and kind of goals. Actually, employees want to, as we said earlier, work for organizations that are offering these kind of benefits, but are also supporting the environment and their own personal goals and objectives within that span as well. So actually, by working in partnership with you guys has been great, because it enables that option to be made available, and actually the simplicity of that kind of process and how we've kind of streamlined it makes it really accessible. Because ultimately for employees, it's not necessarily, not every employee is going to choose this. Let's just be really clear. We understand that, but actually it's important to give choice, because no two employees are the same. And actually what's really important for one will be completely different to another. So we need to kind of, when we work with organizations, we help them to see beyond the, why is my benefit uptake in this area only a couple of percent? And actually you need to look at it in the context of going, but for that couple of percent, that's probably the most important thing for them. And that's why they really love working for you, because it's now part of that benefits package is available to them. But something else can be important for somebody else. So we need to move away from this concept of, I want my take-up rate to be 100% of every single benefit, when reality is we're all different. We all have different needs. So it's about creating that flexibility and choice. And that's why Happl kind of exists, is to give that true personalization and choice to employees, but make sure that the business is not burdened with so much administration and costs that it's impractical to kind of offer it as well. So yeah, certainly for us, that's one of the biggest challenges, and also the benefits of offering and partnering with yourselves. So we had a question come in, it's from Ryan, and basically talking around, asking the question, I'll try and read this out correctly. So if, as an employer, we'd love to kind of put this scheme in place, but we're struggling with even justifying kind of basic kind of levels of kind of pay rises just with kind of financial pressures. I know we talked a little about the cost, but it's kind of maybe think, reiterate this again, like what are the costs for footing the scheme? And actually, is it really truly cost neutral for an organization, particularly in this example from Ryan around can't really justify kind of spending extra kind of money on benefits when they're struggling to kind of justify pay rises as well. So yeah, great to just re-talk around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the employer's perspective, this is absolutely a cost neutral benefit. The employee essentially is covering the cost of the lease through their gross salary deduction. And actually from an employer, as kind of previously touched on, they can actually see a saving in the national insurance, so employer national insurance. I think if, for example, in a scenario where, you are in a position where, employees are wanting a pay rise and you're not necessarily in a position to be able to offer that, I think salary sacrifice benefits is a great way to support employees as they can essentially make their money go a bit further. So, if they were to go for a car scheme, obviously they'll be saving in national insurance and income tax. You could also look at cycle to work schemes, pensions, etc. Also a great way to put a little bit more extra money in your employee's pocket.
No, I agree. I think that's a really important thing to be really clear on, that actually these schemes are in essence cost neutral to employers at the worst case scenario. And as you said, sometimes positive to them as well. So mate, thanks for confirming that, Hugo. And look, I just want to first of all say thank you for joining us, Hugo, today. It's been a pleasure to talk around electric vehicle schemes, a little obviously around ECS and what you guys kind of do, and actually the broader kind of space as well. So I think it's really important for organizations as they look at that broader environmental, social, corporate governance kind of point of view, understanding how benefits, not just EV schemes, but other benefits as well, can really contribute to those kind of goals and that mission, but also why it's important to offer it to employees as well. So particularly giving that personalization, the choice to employees to help them meet their own personal goals and needs. And as we've seen through the stats that we shared today, actually employees are looking for these from their organization, and actually where employers are offering them are more loyal to them and are expecting it from whether it's Gen Z, millennials, and right the way through to the broader kind of workforce as well. So Hugo, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So thank you for joining us today for our benefits briefing, the latest in our series. It's been great to share with you around electric vehicle schemes and how they fit in with that wider ESG kind of framework, and why it's important for organizations to consider that, and also the value for employees as well. If you've got any questions, do feel free to reach out to ourselves at Happl. Also, we can obviously pass those on to our friends and partnerships at the ECS scheme and Hugo as well. We look forward to welcoming you in the next in our series, and hopefully we'll see you in the coming weeks.